give an overview again.
Mhm.
So Ken Wilber's developmental stages of consciousness are drawn from a number of different models and systems that are put together. But essentially, the idea is that just like we see human beings develop from birth all the way up into adulthood, that there is kind of a growing of awareness with development in the brain, from pre-operational to formal operational to concrete operational, which are all terms of developmental psychologist Piaget. So too, our evolution as a human species has also followed that same developmental track.
I got it.
Thank you. Yeah, well, you know what I need to do is I need to
Yeah,
unlock it.
block.
Well, the only thing is it's the, I'm gonna unlock it because of the,
Oh, the outside?
hi Sheila, welcome. Let me unlock this.
Actually.
Okay. So also meaning that from the time that we were cavemen or early human beings, we evolved from being just very egocentric and very survival focused over time towards being able to have a greater sense of who we are as not just being individuals for our own survival, but being connected to others. And so if you notice in the developmental stage, we go from the early egocentric stages, which are on the back of the first page, noted as the infrared, the magenta, and the red stages of consciousness, that are all very individually focused. We see that in children up until a certain age. And then moving into the ethnocentric stage or the amber stage of consciousness, which is on the third page. And that right there is where we really start to identify with groups, with being part of groups, and also have a sense of not only groups and tribes, but also instead of the magical thinking that if I were to, do this rain dance, that rain is going to happen, like that I make that happen. We're actually going to the fact that I do that rain dance so that the God of rain will make it happen. So now there is kind of a projection onto our kind of mythological awareness, creation of mythology and all of that, that it's not just me that's making things happen, but all of these other gods or goddesses. So that is also, that's the ethnocentric stage. And we see the ethnocentric stage playing in all of us.
Oh, yeah.
And in around and across the country and across the world, right? And ethnocentric stage is about concern for our group, whether that is patriotism of the United States, whether that's concern for our group as Jews and focusing just on that, whether that is relating to religion as the sense of that there is a God that's kind of up there that is kind of making things happen. That's also part of, even though it's one God as opposed to multiple, the idea of God as being something up here that if I just were to pray and then something is going to happen from up here. That's also part of the ethnocentric stage. The core thing to remember about Wilber's perspective, which is really, I think, it is so important, is that every stage of evolution of consciousness transcends and includes the previous stages. Transcends and includes. So all of us right here, I think it might be safe to say that even though we have a ethnocentric dimension of our being, I would say that probably most of us here are at an even higher level, which is what we're going to call the orange stage or the world-centric stage. So let's go to that for a moment.
It's Sherry.
Yeah.
She told them to find the
Okay, I don't know if you can help Sherry. I can't help her right now. Yeah.
We can text.
Yeah, if you can text Sherry and just. Okay, so the,
Oh, I'll figure it
the,
out.
the link is on the page where the event is. Okay, so now we go to the orange stage of consciousness, which was really what came as far as the Enlightenment, the 19th century, where all of a sudden it wasn't, we began to develop a certain sense of rationality, scientific empiricism. Now there's also a sense that it's an awareness of us being part of a human family, not just a country or our group. This was the first time that with this new state of consciousness, Jews could actually participate in the public square, right? That we could be a part of universities, that we could do all of that as opposed to, being shut out in that way. That was all part of this new development of orange state of consciousness. And you can see that really, in all of this, technology, professional development, progress, prosperity, we see it in Wall Street, in emerging middle classes around the world, colonialism, sales and marketing, fashion and cosmetic industries. Our self-identity has to be the delivery of results, effectiveness, goals, success within the system, and how we influence others from the orange state is logical argument, data, experience, task-oriented contractual agreements. This is what we would say that probably most of our country is at a world-centric. This is, the industrial age, technological age. We are at most people are at a world-centric perspective. That doesn't mean that within each one of us that we have all of that perception. We also have an ethnocentric dimension and we have an egocentric dimension. All of those are part of it, but we're able to see things here. Then with the 60s, we hit the green stage of consciousness. Again, another transcend and include. And one of the things that's important to realize about this whole developmental model is it is hierarchical, right? It is hierarchical, which means that green is higher than orange. It doesn't mean green is better than orange. It's higher, meaning that it has more, green has more perspectives available to it than orange does, right? Because orange cannot see green, but green can see orange. Right? Does that make sense? Right? Like a cell is made up of atoms, but atoms are not made up of a cell, right? Different degrees of complexity. If we remember, we talked about holons, that all of reality from Arthur Koestler it can be seen as being made up of holons, which is every part of reality is both a whole in itself and part of something else. Whether there are in anything that you say this, there is all kinds of things that make up this. And then this is also part of so many other things as well. All the way on up and all the way on up down. So with green, the new development of green was that now the bottom line is that the focus is on community, harmony, and equality. And the basic piece about green is it takes orange another level to say that, you know what, there are lots of different perspectives and experiences within the human community. And not only the human community, the ecological community, that our biosphere is not only made up of human beings, but animals and other life forms and all of this. And we have to be able to listen and take into account these different perspectives if we are going to move forward in mutually beneficial ways, right? That's a whole, and part of the awareness, part of what made green possible was the development of postmodernism. And we went over this last time, but we'll just kind of go over it again, which is there were three tenets of postmodernism. One is contextualism, that there are no universal truths. All truths are context dependent. And we know that all truth is context dependent, but some contexts themselves are universal, and thus universal truth does exist, right? So a lot of the postmodernists would go ahead and say there is no truth that can be privileged over any other without even the awareness that that statement is privileging a truth over others, right? No truth is privileged over any other is a truth statement in some sense. So the very fact that all truth is contextual goes ahead and says that there is a universal context, that all truth is contextual. So we're seeing here that contextualism does exist, but it doesn't preclude the fact that there aren't overall patterns or truths that are also more universal. The second assumption of postmodernism is constructivism. All truth is not merely given, instead it's co-constructed, right? This is the idea that quantum physics has kind of discovered to say that you can't separate the observer from the observed, right? Like that just by virtue of paying attention to something, that we're a part of determining what its outcome is. The myth of the given is the myth that the world of facts simply exists on its own and by itself awaiting discovery. And while some take this to mean that there is no truth, it really means that the social construction of reality acknowledges that nature and context, like gender and culture, of the knower are an intrinsic part of the knowing process. Okay, so co-constructivism means, where the orange or the world-centric perspective, the science perspective would say, reality is objective. All it has to do is be discovered without taking any account into the fact of, do I bring a bias or an interpretation to how I am receiving or experiencing that truth? And if I'm not aware that I bring a bias in that orange world-centric thing, then I'm going to privilege my perspective for everybody, right?
Problematic.
And that's problematic. That's what Green came ahead and said, wait a second, you go ahead and do that, and suddenly you lose the experience and the information of all these different cultures and people and ecological information and all of this stuff that's there. The third one is aperspectivism, which is that there's no ahistorical pre-given privileged perspectives anywhere. History shows that what we once thought was true was later shown to be only partially true or not at all. What's that?
No, just comments
Yeah.
is that I'm much rather in life experience, the great individuals that I've encountered and that through whatever means are people that usually come from an ethnocentric. Everybody comes from an ethnocentric room and they don't lose that.
Yeah.
With the Martin Luther Kings, whoever, the great people that really make a mark on history and everybody seems to be able to relate to. They have that ethnocentric part of their identity that's a really significant part. I'm not gonna say pride, but a really significant part of their identity, and that's what makes them appeal to the grant. It's not just if you jump to the universal,
Right.
I mean, as you said, it's problematic, and
Exactly.
and, I mean, the college campuses, I mean, what frustrates when I start reading stuff on what's going on and everything, that's what frustrates me is that it's universal, and then where's this coming from? The universal, and you have to, it's about, okay.
Hold that, hold that thought. We're gonna
It's
actually
Alaska.
deal with that
Okay.
stuff, and we're gonna
Okay.
get there. So
Okay, good.
I'm gonna just say one more thing about the aperspectivism, and then we'll kind of open up a little bit just to make sure for anybody online too, that we'll make sure that we're all on the same page as we then move forward into what some of our problem and challenge with the green
Right.
level of consciousness is.
Mm.
So, right, we know from history that things that we find to be true are then later proven to not be true, right? And we learn this in science all the way through as it goes forward. However, aperspectivism, a lot of those theorists, those postmodern theorists will say, therefore, there is no real truth. You can't trust anything to be really true because it's just going to be proven. So, and yet, Charles Peirce, an American philosopher, said, it's fine to say that there's no natural laws, that there are no eternally given, never changing, rigid laws of the universe. But he says there are nature's habits, repetitions of regular patterns in history that continually repeat itself. And, and the sense of this model that we're looking at comes from, I included this on another resource that I sent out to the group over email. But there's a whole article on spiral dynamics, which is the sense that development happens in a spiral, right? So it comes over, and we know that even from our Jewish cycle as we go around the year. We still have Pesach, it comes around the same year. That's it, Kathy. You printed it out.
I didn't get that.
We'll go over it. We'll go over it.
You're the one.
We'll go over it. So even though we come around each year, we're a new person, we're coming at a new level of this. And the same thing that, we're in a situation now, at least for Jews, when we see anti-Semitism coming over. And it's an important question to ask, what is the pattern that we see here that's been repeated before? However, we are not in 1930s Germany. We are not. You can look around and see, we never had a government, that has actively sent billions of dollars of weapons to Israel and the Jewish community to support it to exist. We have not been, we've never been in a place where, at least Sauvier here, you can drive around and see on the corner lit up Jewish stars and menorahs, that are around. We are not in that place. And yet, that pattern is still real, right? So it's not that we say, oh, we don't have anything to worry about it, or that we say it's just like it was. We've all got to move out of the country, in that kind of place. But there is some bit of a balance of both that's here. Okay, let's just stop there for a moment. Does anybody have any questions about these kind of levels of development, making sure that you really understand what is it about green that has been able to, what I want people to know is that you can see that green is a more comprehensive perspective than orange or amber, that it transcends but includes the previous perspectives. And that postmodernism has been an important element to allow us to be more open to hearing the different contexts and perspectives in the human and non-human world. Okay.
Gwyneth has a question.
Okay, go ahead, Gwen.
Need to unmute.
Spiral, because it isn't just repetition, because like a spiral staircase, you're going to a different level, and that has to do with the perspective, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
If you want to turn it on.
Turn it on.
Just can we turn it, see if we can turn this so I can just see people. Great. Yes, exactly. Spiral, it's not the same place, but you're kind of revisiting a pattern in a new way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, ready for some new material now? Okay. All right.
Oh, I think Maury had.
Oh, Maury, go ahead.
Now green is still ethnocentric, is that right?
We're not quite ready for that.
Oh.
Thank you. You could give. Sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry, go ahead, Maury. Green.
Oh, I'm questioning green is still ethnocentric. It was
No, green is not ethnocentric, because what ethnocentric means is that I'm only concerned about my own group. I don't have my area of concern does not extend beyond if I'm only in the amber stage, in the ethnocentric stage, I'm just about my people, nobody else. Green goes ahead and has already had the development of orange, which means that I've already gone world-centric, which means that now I'm concerned with everybody in the world. Now it's not just about my group. I think that everybody has, dimension, but where I'm missing in orange is I think that my perspective on what everybody needs and what reality is universal for everybody. Green level comes ahead and says, okay, green is also world-centric, meaning world-centric. It's another world-centric stage. I'm also, like orange, concerned about everybody in the world, but I am aware that everybody has a different context and perspective and voice. And so now I really need to be able to listen and hear those things and not just impose my own. Does that make sense?
Yes, I guess I was thinking, the ethnocentric meaning your view, looking at the world from where you live. You're saying it has more to do with concern, that you widened your concern. You
Yeah,
broadened your concern.
Broaden your concern in the world-centric stages in orange and green, beyond the amber ethnocentric. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, so that is the dark side of green. So that's green. Now, however, with every developmental level, with every stage of evolution, it doesn't happen easily. It doesn't happen easily, meaning that as there's a new consciousness that is beginning to develop, there has to be an integration of all of the previous states of consciousness into this new thing. And think about this as perfect if we want to go on a developmental thing. I remember, and we see this, if you remember your college age, I'll tell you about my college experience
In Santa Cruz.
at UC Santa Cruz. Very green consciousness,
Oh, yeah.
right? Very much. I remember taking my first intro to feminism class, and my mind was blown. I was suddenly seeing all the places in which all the different groups of people were oppressed, where there was, it wasn't just about feminism and women, it was about all the way through things that I had taken as givens in my orange state of awareness. All of a sudden, I was blown out to see, wow, there's these other dynamics that I was not aware of. And all of a sudden, that's all I wanted to talk about. Right. And to my parents who were, considered with about, business and society and keeping things together. No, protest, go change the world. This is a very healthy green consciousness when it's coming on that kind of level of development, meaning it's expected to be part of teens and young 20s and all of this, because you're opening to this new level and you haven't had the time yet to integrate the previous levels to see that,
Or the experience.
or the experience, right? Like so much of my advocacy for all of the causes that I was about was based on my privileged orange perspective, right? Of being in a comfortable house and a comfortable, all of these things. And it's very easy to say, tear it down,
Oh, yeah.
when I don't know what it is. So it's natural. But when we are seeing it in what happens when that non-integration happens on a much larger societal level. And so if all knowledge is culturally bound and there's no universally valid perspectives, and all knowledge is based on interpretation from a privileged and therefore oppressive perspective, right? Because that's part of, in seeing all of the places in which it's true, there is inequality in the world. There is oppressor and oppressed. It's not everything in the world, as in is being kind of projected, out there as we see the way that we view the situation in Israel, the way that people are viewing the situation in Israel through a lens of oppressor and oppressed, and everything is an oppressor. But if I haven't integrated everything else, I'm going to see things not only that my interpretation is from a privileged and therefore oppressive perspective. It's the job of every individual to fight the authoritarian truths that are handed to them and instead privilege the truth interpretations of minority voices as they are victims, and victims need to be heard. Okay? Green, the wonderful, amazing, healthy part of green is to say that all voices need to be heard. And we're going to listen to this. But then what happens
In a true green.
in a true green?
Right.
But what happens when I start to say, no, now only those of the victims or the oppressed voices need to be heard, and nobody else needs to be heard, because we have to change this balance in some way that's going on. And all of a sudden, there are all of these other voices and needs all around the country and the world that suddenly are canceled, are not, and only one particular voice is heard. And we can see this, leading edge green has taken to undoing what looks like oppression everywhere it could find it with virtually every minority. This goal is noble. It's really noble, but we've seen it so many times taken to absurd extremes, which some of us label as political correctness.
Right.
Mm.
Go ahead.
Or I was gonna say, when people in a different state of consciousness consider green as woke, that whole term of, which I don't quite understand.
So, yeah, we'll talk about that.
But where that comes that you're woke.
Right, so woke is the term that from this model would be used to refer to the dark side of green, right? It's what we're talking about right here. It's this sense of political correctness, some of the extremes that we see. There was a full-fledged sit-in at UCLA because a professor had actually corrected the spelling and grammar on a graduate level exam. The students angrily claimed it created an atmosphere of fear because right when there is no truth, when there's no truth, real truth, then forcing your version of spelling on somebody is an oppressive power drive. This is absurd. This is an extreme, but it's important to note, this is what happens when it comes to the nth degree. And we go, in a feminist meeting, after a first speaker was given a round of applause, one woman reported that the applause gave her anxiety. And so the group voted to stop applauding for the rest of the conference. These are simply cases of people's hypersensitivity being taken to extremes. And instead of seeing the person as themselves maybe suffering from an emotional problem, they are labeled as victims, and it's everybody else's job to cater to their narcissistic whims.
And that's, yes, that's,
Okay?
yeah.
We
That's egocentric.
right, we see this also, Hamas, right? This is a great example of where egocentric and the dark side of green
Right.
comes together right here. Hamas, right?
Yeah.
In their terror and the dark ethnocentric and egocentric forces that they represent, right? There's no question that this is egocentric power and ethnocentric, which is, Islamic jihad extreme.
Right.
They have been labeled as freedom fighters, right? Freedom fighters. That's the thing that gets us, that their perspective is just as valid and worthy as any other. This is, again, and I'm hoping we can understand it from this dark side of green that comes from this postmodern thinking. Every truth is equal. There's no kind of hierarchy. And there is kind of an inability to be able to see where they are in levels of consciousness, and instead kind of bring it into as a valid expression. The idea that truth is relative and then can be employed to advance any of the lower levels of consciousness, egocentric or ethnocentric. And then this coupled with the technology of the internet,
Oh, gosh.
right, means that this is where facts can be invented and can become true in people's minds if they hear it enough times.
Right.
It leads to this reality of alternative facts and the reality that we live in completely different worlds of information,
Or where they,
dividing us.
yeah, or where they take a fact, but omit certain, things that are included in that fact, or made that fact
Bless
as
you.
it is, and only give you partial information.
Right, because as we know, truth is more complicated and multi-layered, and there are different perspectives that are all go into one thing. And but what the job of media is to increase views. And so that therefore, black and white thinking, presenting things
With a lot of hate.
for a certain, that in order to evoke a strong emotional response is in the interest of media companies, of all of this.
But they also put their own bias in there.
Right, it's exactly,
By
it's,
doing that,
it's got,
by only giving you partial
they're only
information.
giving you partial information.
What's the old adage that the more you can lie about something, then it becomes
Harder it
true.
is.
Yes.
Then it becomes true, just keep lying.
That's Joseph Goebbels.
But
That's
it.
exactly what it is.
That's, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna bring it back. That is, to me, was the crux of the problem that we face with this political.
Yep.
Environment.
What
That is-
specifically is the crux?
Well, that from both sides, we were only, the country was only being fed information that would support their side, but not the truth.
Right,
And
But there
the
is no
country has
truth.
But
gotten
what's
so
true?
far away from what is the truth. and
Journalism,
fact.
so far away from journalism
Well,
and moved into the lane of editorializing everything.
And that's
Yeah.
when we got to this mess.
Right.
And-
so
and I
couple,
don't know the social media, how
We're
it'll
pawns,
ever
we're pawns.
recover.
I
I
don't-
mean, with, and because there's so many different ways to provide information, but only what you want to be heard.
yeah, let's hear, you guys, let's kind of come around, let's
Okay.
raise our hands, because there's a lot to say. We'll just have a little open discussion and then move to this next piece. Sheila, and then we'll take some people online. if they-
Having studied journalism, one of the things, journalism used to be pandering to the viewers to get viewership. That's not the way it is today. They pander to the political narrative in order to influence the outcome of our politics. So it's a different, I read an article 6 or 7 years ago about the Chinese government financing political campaigns here for
Mhm.
district attorneys.
Yeah.
I was baffled. It took me 5 years to understand their gain in that when I watched Minneapolis burn to the ground because the district attorneys had instructed law enforcement, don't touch them.
Yep.
Leave them alone. We watched a wave of outcome from national district attorneys across the nation, reining in law enforcement. We see the outcome. This runs very, very, very deep.
And dark.
And now we have social media to supplement the goals of bad actors globally. You cannot turn that box on the wall at night and think that you know anything. My children used to call me radical. I said, no, honey, I'm just better read. That's it. You know, you'll catch up when you outgrow your TikTok phase of life. So, yeah, I mean, it's an important point that media is designed now. They're licking their wounds over the fact that I guess we don't have the control that we thought that we had. So there is hope for us as a society if we seize this marker in history to denounce the track we've been running on for the last 20 years.
Right.
And I'll say one more thing and then I'll be quiet. When they seize those flyers in those Ivy League schools that read death to Israel, death to Israel, the next line read death to America, but you didn't see that.
Right.
It was on the same flyer. I saw it. Everywhere in those universities, it read death to Israel, death to America. That was not shared with the American public. They might have had some wild effect on their belief system. So it was blocked. So that's all.
Okay, so let me get a few online. We'll come back to you in a moment. All right, anybody online have anything yes, Janet.
Hi. So part of what this reminds me of, and I'll try to be as brief as possible, in terms of the brain, we have 3 different brains operating systems in our brain. We have a survival brain from the reptilian era that's over 200 million years old, and then we have a mammalian brain in the center, and we have a primate brain at the top, the thinking cortex, which is 2 million years old. So these brains all developed when the Earth's environment was very different. So our struggle as human beings is, when is it helpful to have our reptilian brain, our survival flight come on? And when is it not helpful? And what is most effective or not effective in helping that survival brain to calm down? And so one of the things that we see in psychology is people who are, for example, suffering from a lot of anxiety. There is an alliance formed between the survival brain that says this is an emergency, go into fight flight, and the thinking brain, the newest brain, that puts out all the reasons why this is an emergency. Yes, he's coming to get me. Yes, my door isn't locked. Yes, the police aren't functioning, whatever the thoughts are. And there's this sort of unholy alliance between the survival brain and the thinking brain that keeps people in a loop that, for example, makes them more and more anxious. And one of the ways to get out of that is to shift away from the thinking brain, which is not helping the survival brain to calm down, and move into the mammalian brain, which is more connected, the nurturing brain that helps babies calm down, right, when they're panicked that they don't have enough to eat. So that's a very quick explanation of that. So part of what I'm hearing here between the ethnocentric and the egocentric is that a lot of what we're going through now is also an alliance between the orange brain, okay, which brings in logic, and that logic and that, information sourcing makes an alliance with the egocentric worldview and the ethnocentric worldview, and it hammers us into polarization, into emergency status, into, the world is at an end. And so in other words, the same unholy alliance is happening societally or interpersonally as happens within the individual. And there's a need for for moving to the non-dark side of the green to help us come down from this and to not have the thinking brain keep feeding the worst information possible to the survival brain. So I sort of crisscross between these 2 different views of things, but I hope that's clarifying.
Great. Thank you, Janet.
I know the voice.
I see you, Gwen,
Yeah.
but there's somebody else over here too that, Manny, please.
So 3 points. Journalism. We in this room caused the death of journalism because 30 years ago, I subscribed to the New York Times. I received the paper I read it from cover to cover, and there were advertisements all throughout the New York Times. That's what paid for all the journalists. We stopped doing that. For myself, I now look at the internet, I get news feeds.
Yeah.
And unless I click on a link, they're not gonna get paid to hire the journalists. So it's partly my fault, partly all of our fault for not supporting this.
Sure.
And the only way this is gonna get better, it took 20, 30 years to get here. The only way it's gonna get better is if we continue to subscribe or listen to the CNN, listen to Fox News, and correlate the information. And by the way, anytime you hear the words, anytime you start an article and it says an undisclosed source
Yeah, it's
said
gossip.
this, delete it
Yeah.
Yeah,
immediately.
you're about to read gossip.
Right,
Yes.
so I just wanted to, so there's a few different levels that we're talking about here. One is just becoming more aware of where are these different levels of development?
Exactly.
Where do we kind of come from? Then there is this level of, okay, as we're experiencing in our society, having to deal with information, how do we, as a culture, began to develop more of a media literacy of as far as being able to try to analyze, understand, try to sift through kind of craziness. And that was a great perspective. And there's something even more that we need to do that I want us to get to.
Why?
For
That's
for
fast.
timing, did you have one quick?
No, I was just gonna say that I think that the different stages aren't in a straight line. In other words, like you could be green and then go back to orange, all in one day.
Yes.
And I think that's what makes it even more challenging, because what happens is you think, oh, I'm in green, so now I'm okay, or whatever you want to call it, but you really don't realize that sometimes you could be an ego, centric. And so you have to be very self-aware. That's what I've come to.
Really, really well said, Phyllis. So to
Yeah.
just, this is coming into, again, this part of the theory that's about transcend and include. Meaning that for those of us that can look at and identify and say, yeah, I would say that I'm mostly at a green place of awareness. It doesn't mean that we in different moments won't be completely only operating from our egocentric or our ethnocentric and kind of forget about that kind of larger piece. That's what part of like having, I think, spiritual practice, religion, community helps continue to remind us to have that kind of larger connection.
Why the question?
Yeah.
I have more, actually, it may be a question really. So I'm going more into the spiritual realm.
Yeah.
And if you don't have those boundaries, the gevurah, if you don't have that, how can you function in the world? So how do you go from I'm thinking that's egocentric if you have boundaries. So that, because if you don't have them, you can't function. So I think you need a healthy combination of all of this.
100%.
Yeah.
But I would also encourage you to think of that boundaries is not just a function only of the egocentric state of awareness, but it is the foundation, meaning that whether I'm operating at an ethnocentric or a world-centric, I still, boundaries have to be a part of my life. The question is what kinds of boundaries do I set? Do I set only boundaries that are just about me? Do I set boundaries that are about us? How big is us? Is it over here? And that's going to be dependent on my levels of awareness. The other thing to just realize is that we can also have, Wilbur has, besides this idea of stages that we're going through, states. So meaning that one can have an experience of a higher level of consciousness, but that's not necessarily where you live on a day-to-day, right? You can be mostly on an orange and have experiences of green or higher, but then, come kind of back and kind of my day-to-day is more in this orange place, let's
Right.
just say.
Where do you process it? What
Yeah,
level
where's
you
process-
process it versus?
Okay, so just because of time, I know that there's some online here and and also here are some more comments. There are two more things that I want to make sure that we get to do, and then we can open up more with other conversations. One is I want to look at the election.
Mhm.
I want to look at the election of President Donald Trump, and try to have a little bit of exploration about what are all of the factors, all of the different levels of consciousness that were part of making that piece happen. And then I want to talk about moving forward, which in some sense is kind of the most important thing. But I think that really the purpose of these two sessions were more to try to get an analysis and understanding of where we are, but we do have to have something to go forward. And so I've asked Ellen, and Ellen mentioned with Manny as well,
I need Manny for
as
backup.
being people who, from my experience, do have a general green level of consciousness and voted for Donald Trump, to share a little bit about what was part of your thinking of going through. And then I want us to be able to kind of look at the different levels. And these are just two people. This is not symbolic of where everybody else is coming from and why this happened. But, given that we might have, a community that is, and Jewish community in general tends to lean more to the left,
Yeah.
want to really appreciate you for sharing a little bit. So why don't you start, Ellen?
Okay, and actually I feel very comfortable because I know who I'm surrounded by.
And before
but
you share,
yeah.
I guess why I want to say it, I'm asking this specifically is because I think
Yeah.
more than any presidential election, both the one in 2016 and one here, in my lifetime at least, and I think in my parents' lifetime, has there never been more of a polarizing figure, on it, that was elected president. I think, a lot of, I'm going to just say, personally, you can look and just see that he's a pretty offensive guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a pretty offensive guy. And so it's very hard for many people to look at this and say, if you're voting for this offensive guy, you must not have any morals at all.
And you must be offensive.
And you must be offensive. So, hold on, Kathy. So enlighten
Yeah.
us.
Okay, so first of all, now that you've set the stage
Yeah.
saying he's offensive,
Yeah,
okay, so I beg to differ.
okay.
Do I like Manny and I were talking, do I like any politician? You have to be below orange to be a politician in general. So I just need to say that and also say that that's how you define him.
Yeah.
So so I'm going to unset the
Unset.
table.
Thank you.
Okay, and the reason is I find it wasn't for Trump per se. It was for the fact that he really was running on a populist bill. And if you see the people that he has chosen around him, do I like everybody? Of course not, because I don't lean this way or that way. But it is a very diverse group of people. And I found that and I'm just giving a real basic here. And then please, all of you that I know so well, just jump right in.
No, I'm not.
No,
gonna ask-
no, you're not
no,
gonna do that?
I'm not gonna
Okay,
ask people to
sorry,
jump
I'm a
right in.
teacher, what can I
And
say?
I just want to say, just as you're listening,
Yeah.
as you're listening to Ellen and to Manny, this is what I want to ask. This is what, Abby, just,
No,
just,
no, you can't,
just,
you can't now.
just-
I gotta get into this.
just hold on, just hold on.
Yeah.
Really, I want everybody to just listen. You may hear things that you 100% disagree about. That's
You may
fine.
cringe.
That's fine. You may cringe, but open this as hearing, this is hearing voices to understand
yeah.
more deeply why we are here in the place that we're here. So please.
So just again, because we're running out of time, I found that his platform was more diverse. And over the past 4 years, watching anyone with a different opinion was canceled, the SWAT team came in, this person lost their law license, this law. I want to find, this is only one segment. A group, a populist group that will have many different kinds of people, and you cannot deny that the people that he has chosen come from all avenues of thought. I feel that would not happen had Kamala come in. I think that's number one. It's all basic because we don't have time. Number two, I do feel on an egocentric level that we first, and you'll have to remind what Hillel said, we first have to have our own strength. And then we can move forward and help others. What is if I'm not for myself?
So if I'm not for myself, who will be
Who
for
will
me?
be
And
for
if
me?
I'm only for myself, who am I?
And that's
Yeah.
it. And that's what and that is how I'm seeing
That's the
this.
most amazing sign in Yad Vashem.
Yeah.
Yes,
the-
yes.
Let's just keep
yeah.
it going.
So I feel that we have been very weak. The world is exploding. I hope I'm correct. I could be wrong. What do I know? I'm a choreographer, but that with more strength coming from our own egocentric country, we will then be able to go forth and help others. And as far as calling, and I'm digressing a tad, but as far as calling those who are privileged, I hate that buzzword. I also hate the word victim. Those who are privileged, if you will notice that those are the people that do get into the trenches and work to build the homes for those who don't have, who give monies because they have it, who hire hundreds of people so they have jobs. I could never be a brain surgeon. I'm not smart enough. I'm not equal to a lot of people. We're not born equal as far as this goes, but I can do the best I can within what I have to work hard. And I have found that I've been able to do that. And I now I am giving back for society, for this community. So I'm not feeling like I'm privileged. I am privileged. I'm privileged because I have the opportunity to give to others.
Thank you.
So I think it's a good word, not a bad word.
Okay, so very
So
appreciated.
it's a three different
Yes,
categories.
thank you. So I just want to, so from Ken Wilber's model, just say what I heard from Ellen is that there is a dimension of orange that's possible here about building and doing and creating for others. There is an aspect, there's a part of it that a small part that's an amber and ethnocentric to say better to start with us and our group first, but not for only our group. Start with our group so that we can go out. So that's all that is that's a combination between the orange, the world centric, the orange and ethnocentric and amber. And there's a look on the dark side of green to say that this way that our country has developed in woke and privilege and victim and all of this kind of thinking that we've been talking about here is taking us way off, and that we got to kind of get back on. Quick, Manny, do you mind on just on one foot quickly, if you can share a little bit about your perspective?
So, put it simply, 15 months ago, I considered myself liberal, socially, and I voted. And if you told me I was going to vote for Trump, I would have said you're a fool, because I really disliked the man back then. I still dislike him right now. I voted for him because I think the country is under Kamala, under what I've seen with Obama and then Biden and now Kamala, the country's going in the wrong direction. Israel is very important to all of us. And I feel that the Democratic Party has swung so far in one direction, and they need to correct themselves in so many ways. And I do believe there's so many things I can say, but I do believe fundamental point is that if Israel is important to us in this room, because it is the center of Jewish faith, no matter what you think. If Israel is important, foreign policy is important. The Democratic Party have become a party of negotiation, of appeasement, just as Chamberlain was in 1938 with Hitler. Right now, the Islam, we're really in the middle of a battle of good versus evil.
Amen.
And maybe you think that, if you're supporting Hamas, and you think that they're freedom fighters, maybe you think that they're good. I don't. I think that there's good versus evil, and I think that the only way to fix it is not by trying to please both sides, as the Democrats have clearly tried to do, but focusing on your self-interests, which are American values, and you need strength, peace through strength.
Yeah.
And Trump, we'll see, but I truly believe that Trump is the only way that we can get to that point and fight the evil that's facing not just us,
The world.
the world. And you
Western
mentioned
civilization.
Western civilization,
Mhm.
and Rabbi, you mentioned that we are not in 1930 some Germany right now,
Mm.
and you're completely right. But we are in if you do research on Germany, Germany in the 1920s was the most democratic nation in the world.
Just, yeah, conclude it, just here for time, I want to get.
And they became driven by Hitler. London is there right now. Southern France is there right now. And you
Jews are
need,
fleeing. Jews are fleeing France.
Jews are fleeing. And yes, we're not there. And yeah, I can walk around Southern California. Anyway.
So just for time,
Yeah,
thank you,
thank
Matt.
you.
So I appreciate both of you, and this is really what we're again bringing up, and I appreciate you both sharing what you did. Right, this is not about a political debate right now. Like that's not what the purpose of asking them to share. And so I'm only asking this one side to hear this particular side of things, because it's a way of understanding some of why this election happened. First from two, and I think in kind of looking around, we could see that on people who are just on the egocentric level, right? Trump does what he wants and he projects power. On the ethnocentric level, Trump prioritizes America and the common person, and that's how it's projected. And in this case, as Manny was sharing, the belief Israel as well. World-centric, Trump supports big businesses, reduces taxes, will curb inflation. And then this anti-green, dark green, which is this way that we have gone off track in very ways. And how do we course correct? And that's really an interesting question. How do we course correct to get more on the healthy side of green so we can move to the next level of awareness? And that's where I want to, just for time, Kathy, do you
Two
mind?
more sessions.
Only 2 seconds. I was just gonna say that sometimes Trump voters feel that they're in the minority when you're in a Jewish group.
Not in
Yeah.
this
And I
table.
just wanted to.
It's-
Oh, maybe not,
it's-
but I just wanted to say it's
it's
not so
social.
clear.
Right.
It's not so clear cut. Our son John is a Trump supporter
Yeah.
and we've had many
Two of
discussions.
my sisters.
And I do, I support many aspects
I agree with that.
of our
Absolutely.
And the
discussion.
communication,
Amen.
the communication. is
Okay,
the key.
folks, okay,
We need 2 more sessions. Can you guys figure that out?
yeah. Go ahead.
We already.
Oh, you passed these out?
How we got here,
Yeah,
how we got to this
Yes.
state. We just have to say that, that we have to look at the other side about what was done wrong to get us here as well.
Exactly.
yes.
Exactly.
I don't agree with some of the summary that was presented about why we got here.
Fair enough, fair enough. I think what my goal out of today is that we can be able to understand what's happening right now through Ken Wilber's integral theory model,
Yeah.
whether you think that model is helpful or not helpful, but just to look at it for thoughts. And then as far as going forward, so,
Rabbi, can I cut in just 1 second?
well, the problem is, Miles, is it's 2:05. And how we go forward is critical here.
Yeah.
So the question is do we spend the time here with other voices, or do we look at the material that's going forward? Okay, my apologies. And you haven't had a chance to share, so I'm sorry about that. All right, so one of the things that's amazing about our first century rabbis is that in many ways, they were already at green
Mhm.
in ways that the rest of the world was not, had not even reached orange yet. And one of those was their value of discussion and argument. The fact that they could look and say, my way of seeing things is not everybody's way of seeing things, and that I want to hear and listen, and that they supported argument, discussion, different perspectives. Now, it's important to say that it's still, in many ways, it's still mixed up with ethnocentrism, because they were really only about hearing from other Jews, you know, at that time, about those things. There wasn't kind of that world-centric, there hadn't been that opportunity to participate in the world stage. But these aspects of green, they were already kind of bringing in within their own community. So, you know, one of these is an argument for the, if you look at the first one from Pirkei Avot, for heaven's sake will have lasting value, but our argument not for heaven's sake will not endure. What's an example of controversy for heaven's sake? The debates of Hillel and Shammai. What's an example of controversy not for heaven's sake? The rebellion of Korach and its associates. Really briefly, Korach was all about power. It was all about saying, listen to my perspective, because I have an agenda here that I want to accomplish, which involves me ascending to leadership. Hillel and Shammai had a different one. And if you look at these and these are the words of the living God, for 3 years, there was a dispute between the school of Shammai and the school of Hillel, the former asserting the law is in agreement with our views, and the latter contending the law is in agreement with our views. And then a voice from heaven announced, these and these are both words of the living God, but the law is in agreement with the rulings of the school of Hillel. Okay, they both are valid in some ways, but they're both words of the living God, but we're going to go with Hillel. Why? Since, however, both are the words of the living God, what was it that entitled the school of Hillel to have the law affixed to their rulings? Because they were kindly and modest, they taught their own rulings as well as those of Shammai. And even more, they taught the rules of Shammai, the school of Shammai, before their own. This should teach you that one who humbles himself is exalted by the Holy One, and one who exalts oneself is humbled by the Holy One. Right? And then finally, why we record the minority opinion. Why do we record the non-accepted opinions? To teach that future generations, that one need not demand that one's own way is correct, for our forebears did not do so. Why then do we record the minority opinion of one as opposed to the majority opinion of the rest, given that the majority decides? So that a future court might have reference to them and rule thereby. Right? There's a sense of that all the different voices have something to contribute, something to honor. And it may not be that we go by that particular perspective now for what's needed here, but it may be that we might need it in the future, and we have to take it really seriously. And part of this working with green is there's kind of two ways forward. One is to work with existing green to try to help green get back on track. And that's where we kind of go against the woke and the political correctness and all of this sense that says, I have the moral high ground and you disagree with me on this, you think this, you must just be wrong. If you take it your way, you're taking the country in the wrong direction. And again, I'm bringing that into the woke and the political correctness, but there can be those perspectives on the right as well, 100%. But this kind of fact, and it's really hard right now, right? Because it's so hard, because what it means is in order to do that, we have to have conversations. We have to actually talk. And not only do we have to have conversations, we have to be willing to listen. We have to be like Hillel, kindly and modest and respectful of somebody's opinion that we don't agree with. We've got to be interested, try to understand, why do you see it that way? Like, I so encourage, you know, for those of you who heard Alan or Manny share and say, how could you think that? to talk to them, to have that conversation.
Respectfully.
Respectfully, right? You know, but what is it that we're up against? We're up against the fact that all of us are in our own bubbles, right? Whether we're operating online and we're hearing our own news sources. We heard some nice comments here about how we can be more trying to get information through trying to do a lot of different news sources. There's even one called Ground News, which actually collates a lot of different news articles on any one issue from different sources that are labeled as left, moderate, center, whatever it is. We can do that in our bubbles, but more if we've lost the town square, we've lost the situation where we are able to have conversations with people that are different from us. How do we actively, and we have to be active about it, try to have those conversations? I think our synagogue is a big one, and I'm going to continue to try to do that. Just a quick plug, and then I'll open up for comments and questions for those who can still stay. But a week from Saturday, December 21st, we're having a lunch and learn with myself and Pastor Brian Hill from Oak House Church about Jewish and Christian perspectives on having difficult conversations with one another. Pastor Brian's become a new friend and is also really dedicated in a evangelical church to try to create spaces for people on left and right to talk together and to give people the skills to listen respectfully and do those. And so he'll be sharing about how he does that, and from his faith, we'll have a little interactive opportunity to do that with each other.
That Saturday?
That's it's December 21st.
Yeah. Right.
So that is one place. And then the last thing I'll say, and then we'll open it up for a little bit of discussion, is the next option is, how do we ascend to the next level past green? Right? We got to course correct green, but there are some of us that are moving to teal. And what's teal? This is where we get into those things that some people call spiritual. But just to look at the values, the bottom line is the qualities and responsibilities of being. The basic theme is live fully and responsibly as what you are and learn to become. What's important? The magnificence of existence over material possessions, flexibility, spontaneity, functionality, knowledge and competency. It's one that a teal perspective is one that really is able to look and help facilitate all those lower levels of consciousness from green all the way down to be able to come towards one perspective. Okay.
Can you give us an example of this though? I love this concept of the majority votes, but then you take the minority view for the future.
I will. I'll come to that in a second, but Miles, Heather, and, or sorry, not Heather. Gwen, are you still there?
Gwen had to leave.
Gwen's off. So let's do Miles, Heather, Maury, and Manny. Go ahead.
Well, essentially, it's my belief and how I try to live is that love thy neighbor, love thy enemy, as I would try to love myself and respect myself. And to be able to have those conversations openly and just simply listen. And the more you break bread with people, the better your understanding will be, the more compassionate perhaps you can become, or more self-aware, so that when you are having conversations with others, you're also growing yourself. So you're accomplishing something better with each conversation, because we're not all right, we're not all wrong, we just are. And in able to be, we have to allow people to have that form and that platform. And you have to have that heart. Just because I may disagree with Rabbi Kavod or Ellen or Heather on something, doesn't mean that they're not my friend, that I don't care. I want to know more. What is their passion? And that makes me a better person, more evolved and more understanding.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So-
Totally agree.
And another thing about Hillel and Shammai, which is there's an amazing Mishnah that says that even though they differed about their opinions on kashrut, what was kosher or not, they would eat in each other's houses.
Mhm.
Imagine that, which means
Wow.
I look and say that I know that you're not doing things the way that I do them, the way that I believe that they should be done, but our relationship is more important.
Yeah.
That we're gonna eat, that I'm gonna suspend that
Right.
for a moment to go ahead and do that.
That's shocking.
It's
That's an
amazing.
amazing concept.
Heather,
I'm not very good at expressing myself. I'm
Yes,
glad you
you are.
went to the part as how do we go to the next stage? Because I was just asking myself in my head, how do we go to the next stage? As an individual or a small community, I think that may be possible, but on a world stage, okay, let's not go world, on an American stage, because our government has to make a choice for a single leader. It's very nice to understand everybody's perspective, but at the end of the day, you are narrowing all of those opinions and having to make a choice.
That's a
If you
good
had a
point.
Knesset or
Someone has to
other
make a mental
types of
sense.
government where you are co-leading, we're funneled into a choice. And you just, at some point, you can have all those conversations and you can understand and you can appreciate. But you not necessarily get what you want, and you can support the leadership being an American, but it's hard to be broader when your country or the way things are run. You have to make a choice, and sometimes if you're green or you're good green, you can't do necessarily what you want, and I think getting to the next stage and having a federation where we all get along is because of the way humanity has progressed. I'm just really pessimistic because I think the reason why there were Hillel and Shammai and Far East and people who are Buddhist and people who ascend to the next level, where it's enlightenment is kind of this next level, I would think. To me, it would be very hard for everybody to get on board with that. So that was that. And my second little tidbit was that the Webster term of the year, the word is polarization,
Yeah.
which is very sad.
right, right, so we see where it is. I think what you're saying too about everybody, you know, it really underscores for me the importance of our democracy, right? Democracy as being a system, you know, that is about trying to ultimately have the people's voice heard and, you know, and validated and all of that. And it's hard. And that's why, you know, ultimately with whoever is elected or whatever, whatever perspective it goes, the preservation of the system over what anybody else wants to see happen as the outcome, you know, is essential in coming back to all of that. Maury.
So, thank you, Rabbi. I was thinking, I'm glad Ellen is here because Ellen, I think, is a good example for me in my relationships with how you compartmentalize, how I disagree with her totally about Donald Trump.
I'm not surprised.
But she, I mean, and even before, and we've had a lot of discussions about our families where we have things in common. But for me, she has been always so kind and wonderful to me. And that's Ellen. So I have, you know, the Ellen in my life and the Ellen that, you know, whose worldview, I won't even say it that way, but it's political views.
Maury, I love you any way you want.
So it's wonderful, you know, it's wonderful to have someone like you to be able to connect with.
Thank you, Maury. You know, I think ultimately, I hope one of the takeaways towards this is that we are all on this journey. You know, all of us individually and as human beings are on a journey of evolving consciousness. And what's very interesting is that the Rambam, Maimonides, 13th century, says that one, you know, as all of us know, we are not a dogmatic tradition, meaning that there are a lot of different opinions and there's room for a lot of different opinions. There isn't kind of dogma that one has to believe. But Maimonides, the Rambam, kind of articulated 12 principles of faith. But she said that these are really core to Jewish faith. And of course, we know that you don't have to believe them if it's not there, but he articulates it in a way that represents a lot of the tradition. And one of the things he says is that I believe in perfect faith in the coming of the Messiah. Whether or not, and even though the Messiah may tarry, right, it may not come in the time that we want, I believe that it will happen. I just want to share the way that I take that is there are different ways to think about Messiah than a person that's going to come. It's also, there is writing in our tradition about Messiah as a messianic consciousness. You know, like when we say the Aleinu at the end of a service, Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shmo echad, and people will say that God is one and God's name is one. I really take that as saying this is a time that I am living for and praying for and working for, where all of humanity gets to a place evolutionary where I see the godliness in all of life, in everything. I have what would be here a teal or turquoise, what he calls the cosmocentric stages of consciousness, you know, one in which there is that awareness. And what he says is to believe in perfect faith is to know, is to believe, is to have the faith that we are headed there. We are headed there. It's a different question to say, will we make it there in these bodies on this earth, or will we destroy it before we get there? You know, another important question. But in some sense to say that we are moving. And if we look at the trajectory of human evolution and consciousness, we have always been, you know, been moving towards those levels. Even though it seems in so many ways to some of us that we've gone backwards in many things. If you really look, you look at like the Civil Rights Act, and you look at, you know, all of the things that the different kinds of opportunities, just even in this country, that never were 50 years ago, 100 years ago, all of this, you see that things are evolving. So part of in looking at what's happening is there is an attempt right now to course correct, to try to course correct, to move to the next level. And so for each one of us, how can we in our own lives be committed to moving to that next level, to growing in consciousness? Ultimately, it's an inner thing. It's a way that we perceive. It's the way that we act, that we be. Because all of us know that we can't change the world as far as we only have our circles of influence. And certainly the more people that are on higher levels of awareness that can move in higher levels of positions of power, the better, right? To be able to have more impact on things that affect more people. But all of us have our role to play in our own circle, and how can we best do that? And that's where I think as a Jewish community.
It's a great wrap up. That's
Yeah,
great.
we'll wrap up.
Thank you.
Okay,
That's good.
thank you, everybody.
That's fabulous. What I
Thank
got
you,
it.
that's excellent.
Yeah, Kathy.
Another Kathy.
Please
I'll wait till she does.
let this be the opening of more conversations, of talking, of, you know, whatever. This is just to get things